All right, everyone, here we are, the grand finale of our journey through the psychology of money. Today, we're going to bring it all together by looking at two really important stories. First, we'll dive into the author Morgan Housel's own personal money philosophy, and then we're going to uncover the fascinating, kind of surprising history that shapes how every single one of us thinks about our finances.
And you know what? This quote from the one and only Charlie Munger, it's the perfect way to kick things off. He says, "I did not intend to get rich. I just wanted to get independent." That's not just some pithy quote. For Morgan Housel, that single idea is everything. It's the bedrock of his entire financial world, and it's the perfect lens for us to look through for this final chapter.
So here's what we've got on tap. We'll start by asking if there's really one right answer. Then we'll dig into why independence is such a powerful goal. We'll talk about being reasonable instead of just rational. Then we'll zoom out and look at why we all spend the way we do, this thing called the Great Disconnect. And finally, we'll bring it all back to your financial confession.
All right, first up, is there one right answer? Housel starts his final thoughts with this brilliant analogy to medicine. Think about it. A doctor, they know all the science, right? They've read the textbooks, they know the data. But at the end of the day, it's the patient. It's you who has to decide what treatment actually feels right for your life, for your values, for what you're willing to risk.
And that right there, that's the whole point. There is no universal truth in finance. There just isn't. What's a genius move for your best friend could be a total train wreck for you and your family. That's why Housel shares his own story. He's not giving you a prescription. He's just showing you one example of what a truly personal financial plan can look like. So what's the goal then? For Housel, the ultimate prize, the real end game, it's not about being rich. We're not talking fancy cars or giant houses. No. The highest dividend money can possibly pay is something much simpler and much more profound. Independence. And what does that even mean? Well, it's waking up and being able to say, I can do whatever I want today. It's doing work you actually like, with people you like, when you want, for as long as you want. It's all about controlling your time. And you know, this became his North Star after he watched his dad, who was an ER doctor, save up enough money to just walk away from a super high-stress job when he decided he was done. That's a powerful lesson.
Okay, so how does he get there? How do you actually achieve that kind of independence? Well, he does it by making choices that are psychologically reasonable. And that's not always the same as being perfectly mathematically rational. And that distinction, that's absolutely crucial.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. On the one hand, you have the rational choice. Leverage a cheap mortgage to invest the difference, keep your cash holdings low to get better returns. On the other hand, you have the reasonable choice. Own your home outright, no mortgage, keep a big cash reserve, like 20% of his assets, and just consistently invest in a simple, low-cost index fund. A spreadsheet would scream at you to do the rational thing, but Housel goes the other way. Why?
Well, here's his answer, right from the book. He says the feeling of independence he gets from owning his house outright, it just crushes any financial gain he'd get from leveraging it. See, that peace of mind, that's a return too. You can't measure it on a calculator, but it's incredibly valuable. Just knowing that whatever happens in the world, you've got a roof over your head, that's a psychological dividend a spreadsheet will never understand.
And that's what he means by psychologically reasonable. It's all about making financial decisions that let you sleep at night, even if they aren't the most optimal thing on paper. Because that feeling of control, that's what's going to help you stick with your plan for decades. And that is way more valuable than squeezing out an extra 0.5% return.
Okay, so now that we get his personal philosophy, we need to zoom out. Because to really understand why having your own philosophy is so important, you have to understand the world we're living in. Our ideas about money, they didn't just pop out of nowhere. They were forged in the history of the last 70+ years.
So, let's take a quick trip back in time. After World War II ended in 1945, there was this huge fear of another Great Depression. So, what happened? The country basically decided consumption was the strategy to avoid it. Then you get the 1950s, the GI Bill, consumer credit, and a massive spending boom. But by 1973, things started to shift. Some cracks appeared. And then in 1982, a new kind of boom started, one that was very different, which led to what Housel calls the big stretch and eventually the 2008 crisis. It's a wild ride.
So in that period, right after the war, this powerful idea was born that pretty much everyone could achieve a comfortable middle-class life. It was the American dream, right? But then things changed. The economy started to shift in a really fundamental way, and that shared expectations started to run into a very different, very unequal reality. And this really shows the two different worlds that have shaped us.
From 1945 to 73, you had what he calls the egalitarian boom. The country got rich by making the poor less poor, and incomes grew at pretty much the same rate for everyone. But then, from 82 to 2000, you get the unequal boom. Suddenly, economic growth was super concentrated at the very top, and the lifestyles of the rich started to inflate what everyone else thought they should have.
And look at these numbers. Between 1993 and 2012, the income for the top 1% grew by over 86%. Just let that sink in. Skyrocketed.
And for the other 99%, their income grew by just 6.6%, barely budged. So you have this huge economic growth happening in the country, but for almost everyone, their paychecks just weren't keeping up.
But here's the kicker. Our expectations didn't shrink. We all saw the lifestyles of the wealthy on TV and everywhere else, and that became the new normal we aspired to. This led to the big stretch. Median home sizes ballooned. People started taking on huge amounts of debt to buy bigger houses, nicer cars, basically chasing a lifestyle their incomes couldn't actually support anymore.
So, what does all this history mean for you? For me, it means you have to be so careful about the financial game you decide to play. Because the default game, the one society sets for you, is a game of constantly rising expectations and comparing yourself to everyone else. It's a game that's really hard to win.
And here's the most important lesson from all of this history. So much of what we expect from money is based on a world that just doesn't exist anymore. Once you really get that, it's liberating. It frees you from that crazy pressure to keep up with the Joneses. It gives you permission to create your own definition of success, just like Morgan Housel did with his goal of independence.
So that brings us to you. We really want to know, what is your financial North Star? If his is independence, what's yours? Maybe it's security, maybe it's the freedom to travel, maybe it's generosity. And what's one of your unreasonable money decisions? You know that thing you do that a spreadsheet would hate, but it just makes you happy? We would genuinely love to hear your story. Please drop it in the comments below.
And just like that, we've reached the end of our series on the psychology of money. It has been an absolute blast going on this journey with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Now, a couple of quick things. We're going to be putting a full compilation of all the chapters together. That should be out in a few days. And we want to hear from you. What book should we dive into next? Let us know your suggestions down in the comments.
Finally, if you enjoyed this series and you're excited to see what we tackle next, it would mean the world to us if you'd like this explainer and subscribe to Mish Minds. Thanks so much for watching.